How does different parenting styles influence our children? Welcome to Real Parenting with Matli. Matli is committed to supporting parents in the journey of raising children. Joining us today is Rashi Laskari, an expert counseling psychologist with over a decade of experience. She's also the co-founder of Inner Light Counseling Center in Mumbai. Welcome, Rashi. It's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you so much. It is my absolute pleasure. I'm happy to be here, happy to have a conversation around such critical topics, and it's my honor. Thank you for the introduction.
Today, Rashi is here to guide us through the complexities of parenting styles and their impact on mental well-being in children and the importance of counseling support. So let's just jump on to the questions straight away. The main question that we want to address here is how do different parenting styles have, what kind of influence does it have on the kids?
Maybe what parenting styles are, if we help our audiences understand that first, because there are, every parent as an individual chooses the way they relate to their child, and they pick a certain pattern of behavior, a way of relating to the child, a way of responding to the child, and that is what defines the parenting style. So a parenting style would cover basically the demandingness that a parent has from a child and the responsiveness towards the child. So there are 4 core parenting styles that have been exclusively studied, researched, and are out there. And the choice that a parent makes, as we go ahead in our discussion, we'll recognize the choice that a parent makes defines the impact of that on the child's emotional, psychological development.
Okay. And coming from your background, Rashi, when do you think a child probably needs mental health support? And as a parent, are there indicators for me to see, okay, I feel my child needs a mental health support?
So there are indicators. I think parents should always remain more aware of or vigilant with observing their children, and I look at indicators as maybe 3. I put them into 3 categories. One is the changes you see in your child.
Okay.
Now, the large umbrella of changes would include changes in mood, if the child is suddenly quiet, remaining a little sad, etc. Second, changes in context of behavior, academics, if there's a sudden drop, a sudden disinterest in social behavior, physical changes, right? Because emotional stress often manifests itself physically for children as well as adults. So any change that you notice that is consistently there over a period of time, that is abrupt, that is not so usual, is one indicator. Any kind of traumatic experience, by which I would mean if there has been an episode of bullying in school, or if there has been a family crisis, a health emergency, or any kind of abuse that the child has either experienced or even witnessed. Again, that's an indicator. And the third, I would say, if there is anything that the child is communicating, any kind of communicated distress on the part of the child, because parents always tend to take it a little lightly. So if the child comes and says, oh, I'm feeling very lonely, a parent's first response is, it's okay, you will feel better. Or ignore it, or let it be. Sure, I understand that you're trying to help your child become stronger, but be vigilant to see if that keeps coming back, right? Expressed discomfort or expressed emotional disturbance must get the attention. So these are 3 core indicators. Let me also highlight here, every child who shows any of this above does not need mental health support.
How do we know that difference?
Yeah. So I think the way to look at it is if it has been consistently there over time, if you feel like it's disrupting with the child's routine, with your day-to-day functioning, and there's no harm in seeking support. See that every child having any of this above may not have a mental health issue, but they may be going through a phase where they need extra support.
Okay.
Now, whether that extra support is from a parent or from a teacher or from an external support in terms of a counselor or a school counselor or a clinical child psychologist, anybody, they are seeking support. So don't always worry that taking my child to a professional means that they must be having an issue. They probably just need some attention and support, and that's what you should reach out to a professional to clarify.
There exists a stigma around counseling, mental health counseling. Parents are more aware now and it's getting better. But over the years, there's always a stigma attached. How do you think it has changed over the years?
So historically, there has been a stigma attached to mental health as a whole, right? Because mental health issues have not been seen as a medical condition that needs to be treated. It's been seen as like a flaw in your character or something wrong with you, right? Now that extends itself also to the world of child psychology. Back in the day, I used to use this as an example to explain to parents that if your child can't read and has a number, you instantly pick up the child, go to an eye doctor and get them spectacles, because you recognize that without that support, they can't function. But if your child is not reading well because he's showing signs of a learning disability, you will delay the testing process because you're afraid that, tag lag jayega. And there will be a certification that will come in place. It will go with him for the rest of, not recognizing that if he gets diagnosed as a learning disability or anything, dyslexia, dyscalculia, it will support the child to have the right tools to navigate through the problem.
And earlier the better.
Earlier detection, earlier diagnosis, earlier support to the child. So imagine me telling the child that, no, I will not give you the spectacles because I don't want you to get labeled. Right? So that needs to change. People need to recognize that the worry of the stigma or the label should not interfere with the help that the child needs. Because you won't do it for a medical condition, for a physical health condition. So you shouldn't be doing it for
and also
mental
increase the struggle of the child.
Yes. And that struggle reinforces low self-esteem, reinforces low academic performance. So what can be uplifted is actually being further pushed down. Yeah.
Today, if a parent wants to seek counseling for their children, what is our infrastructure in India like?
So a lot of states in India have a policy of mandatory school counselors, which is exceptional. Maharashtra has it. So when a parent recognizes or feels like there is a concern, the first go-to should be either your primary healthcare provider, so could be your family physician, could be your pediatrician, etc., or a teacher or a school counselor. So in bigger cities, that is the first step. And then the reason why that's also important is that you get a feedback from a second agency in the child's life who may be observing their behavior across those changes, and you decipher whether there is or is not a need. And you can always reach out to either the school assistance or support on it, or an independently practicing child counselor, counseling psychologist, clinical psychologist or psychiatrist, depending on the need. And in absolutely rural areas also, let me highlight that there are healthcare centers, and all of them are usually equipped with a counselor. Now the counselor may be a healthcare counselor, may not be equipped as a child specialist, but will definitely be able to be the first point contact for anything to be recognized further from them.
For our viewers, can you throw some light on what exactly the counseling will be like for a child? Let's say for a 2 to 8-year-old age group, and then for an 8 to 15-year-old, what's the process and what nature will it be like?
When you reach out to a professional for the first time, the first goal is to identify the purpose of counseling. So the first point is to take in history. Assessment could be either a formal assessment if that is the requirement of the school. Let's say if a school asks a therapist to do a ADHD assessment, learning disability, IQ, etc., then it's very formally that. But the usual approach is an informal assessment with the child, a detailed history taking about the child's environment at home, at school, what their world looks like basically, right? Their social behavior. So all of that is put together, and then that moves into interactions, one-to-one interactions with the child that focus towards largely, at least initially, so establishing rapport. Very essential to a client-therapist relationship with children, building trust, explaining the purpose of counseling to the child in a language that they understand, right? So they are able to connect to why they are here, and they don't see it as something that their parent is just asking them to do. And of course, recalibrating with the parent and the child, sometimes together and sometimes separately, on expectations from therapy. So this is the first phase, of course, and then as we go ahead, because therapy is a very dynamic process, it is important for us to keep evolving the goals of the counseling plan, uniquely designed basis the need of the child, because with children we can't work like we work with adults.
Absolutely.
Right? It's usually a lot around art therapy, play therapy, ways in which they understand things, and a lot of role play, things that for them becomes interesting, engaging, yet something that they are able to learn. So it's like a skill building, right? They are learning skills to cope with the stress that they are facing in different situations, and whatever the issues may be, we kind of keep addressing them. So the goals keep moving as the sessions progress.
Okay. But if there are 3 simple steps that a parent should keep in mind, just to keep a check that my child's mental health is fine or is it concerning, what would be like the basically easy steps that we should keep in mind?
The first, most easy step, easier said than done, but most easy, and I see this for all relationships, but more so parent-child, is open communication. Right? Maintaining open, healthy communication with your child, where you're able to give them space to share their emotions, to share their thoughts and feelings without being judgmental. Being there for them in a complete listening capacity is extremely important, because that gives them the space to share more, and that takes care of their overall emotional development also. Children always want to feel understood, and that's what heard, right? So that's one. Second is, as an extension of that, maybe also to be emotionally more available or more validating to the child. So emotional support and validation, your consistent presence will make an impact there, because you're not just listening because you want to correct the child, but you're listening because you want to help them navigate through something, and that helps them know that this is their safe space. Validation is again important from the parent, because then children tend to, if they don't get that, then they always feel like they have to depend on external sources of validation, right? So that's another thing. Third, if I have to say, I think just maintaining a more conducive home environment where you're able to be vigilant about the changes that you observe in your child's behavior, but you're also able to maintain space. So maybe going back to the authoritative parenting style, right, where you're invested, you're involved, you're supportive, you're nurturing, but you're also giving space for them to grow in their own individuality. So I think these are key, simple to-dos that we can easily bring into our day-to-day routines that would really help maybe solidify the child's emotional, social development.
Absolutely. I think we can easily inject these kind of steps into our life to a better home environment for the kids.
Yeah, even if we start with one at a time, and it's like making an investment, right? You're investing a little effort towards your child, knowing that this is going to cumulatively come with certain returns, and those returns are in how they shape their personalities.
I think slow and steady, but we'll eventually see the changes in the house. So with that, Rashi, I think we've come to the end of the show. Thank you, Rashi, for coming here and spending this time and giving us some insightful advice on mental health for children. And we would like to give you a small token of appreciation.
Thank you so much. It was my absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
See you again next time on Real Parenting with Matli.